Here we go.
Yeah, I think we're on YouTube now. Yep. Oh, here we go. Everyone's in.
Hello. Hello,
Welcome,
hello.
welcome. Let me
We'll,
change the chat settings really quick.
yeah, we'll turn on chat for you guys.
Chat should be
Welcome,
working now.
welcome.
Hey.
There we go.
Wow.
How is everyone doing?
So great. How are you guys?
Hello, hello. Peachy.
Just for anyone who's new, at 10 past is when we'll like officially start. We'll give some time here for everyone to kind of come in and get settled, and then we'll kick things off at 10 past.
You can share that initial screen, Rob.
Cool.
And welcome to everyone from Spitfire as well. We've got like a real mix today. This is going to be people from mastering.com community, but I think maybe majority Spitfire actually today. We
Cool.
should do a poll.
I can do that.
Now that we figured out polls, it's so much more efficient than twos in the.
Yeah, I love our way we used to try to do it. It's very cute of us.
British Columbia.
I like the
Very
applause
good.
meter.
Two Robs, a Caleb, and a Julia. That is correct.
Brooklyn in the house.
There we
Nice.
go. Main.
Whatever. Jake's not here today. Jake's off today. He'll be here on Wednesday though.
Yeah.
Wednesday is Jake Day. Today is composition day, I guess we could call it. What would you call today, Rob? You have to give it a
Yeah,
name.
it's composition day. It's look under the hood of a composition day.
Jake gets days off. That is correct.
Not very many.
Not very many. He probably spends them in the basement making music.
Finland, London. Oh, there we go.
Oh, Oxford. David, I'm in Oxford. There we go. We're probably like 10 minutes from each other. Replay. Someone asking about replays. By the way, guys, all replays, as you can see here on screen, if you want the URL, courses.mastering.com. That's where we will be posting replays. And yeah, so mostly Spitfire today. We're just doing a
Cool.
poll now. You guys can't see it yet. Interesting. This is very chill without Jake's frantic energy. One of
We're
us
starting
like
off Zen.
drink like 5 coffees.
Yeah, I gotta limit the caffeine. I made that mistake. The our first child had like way too much coffee, and I was just a wreck. Just a wreck.
I thought you were saying your first child had too much coffee, but you
Oh
mean
well,
when
Wait,
I
that's
give
what
my
I
first
thought you
child too much
said.
coffee too. No, when my wife and I had our first child, I was like, I don't know. I thought it would be a good idea. Like I needed the extra caffeine, as though there wouldn't be enough just kind of holistic excitement. So yeah, oof, a lot of caffeine.
Yeah, I'm in that phase too. A 6 month old, anyone doesn't know.
Oh,
So I would say I'm in
wow.
the thick of it, but kind of coming out the other end of the thick of it, I guess.
Yeah,
Now, when people say hi, Rob, I don't know if they're speaking to me or not.
you just Yeah, we could assume that. We started just defaulting to calling me shoe stack internally. You all
Mm.
can do the same. We're
You
friends
guys,
now.
you guys know Rob? Anyone here already know Rob?
Someone's telling me I'm in the dark.
It's a little dark.
Okay.
We've probably got some TRE people in here who know Rob. TRE, for anyone who doesn't know, is the reverse engineer, which is our 2-year program.
I'm launching a new poll here.
All right.
Lots of first timers.
Cool.
Crazy. Getting to know you through polls.
Oh, I like it. All right.
The leaders so far are first one today and 5+. So a good mix of the new and the old.
I like it.
Caleb has discovered the polls feature. Yeah. A couple of events ago, I was like, why are we putting ones and twos in chat when we clearly can't keep up with reading how many there are?
It was kind of cool to just watch a waterfall of ones and twos and then
This
use kind of
feels
like an applause meter.
I
this is
felt
like
old.
too efficient.
I felt old for the first time in my life. Yeah, the best was trying to run the contest for Produce-a-thon using ones and twos.
Yeah.
And that's when we did the poll, I think, for the first time. We're like, someone's like, you know, they have polls, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Of course I did.
Yeah.
Of course
Right.
I knew that.
Obviously.
Is Rob cousin of Dwight Schrute? I don't know if they're talking about me or you, Rob. Either way, I guess it's offensive or a compliment. Depends what you think of Dwight Schrute.
See, he used to be Shroot and he changed it to Shoe Stack just
Yeah.
to get people off his scent.
That's it.
Luke said massive compliment.
That's it. I can't see the chat because of the whole screen.
Yeah, that's all right.
I'll leave it to you.
You
After the
can
robots,
do it.
after the robots take over the universe, when they're passing the chat from TR events, all the ones will cause the second death because of the binary interpretations.
Wow.
I like it.
Someone started early on a Monday.
Yeah, I think the poll seems to slow down, so now I can click share results and then you guys can see. And there we go. Lots of newcomers here, which is awesome.
That's awesome.
We're going to get to know each other the next few days. You'll get to know these guys.
We're in it.
Yeah, and you'll get to know Rob. Rob's amazing. You guys are lucky that you've got Rob here because Rob does a ton of stuff with us internally, but I think this is like the first thing outside of our kind of like internal community, really.
Yeah. Yeah.
Your baptism
By
by
fire.
fire. Yeah, here you go,
Yeah.
1,000 people.
About 1,000 people so far. It's still
Right on.
climbing. That's why we wait 10 minutes as people tend to filter in for the first 10 minutes and then we can get going.
Yeah. I'm
Most
always
most important thing right now is make sure your Zoom chat settings are set to everyone instead of hosts and panelists, just like it says on the screen there. Just go ahead and change your Zoom settings from hosts and panelists to everyone. And jot down, replays will be available at courses.mastering.com. If any of you have any trouble, you should all have an account there. You wouldn't be here, so you can just log in and they'll all be there, as well as other cool courses you can check out, free stuff. And if you have any trouble with any of that, just email us support@mastering.com. We're happy to help you out.
How long does the event last? This is the first time we've done this event, so what do you reckon, Rob?
I feel like You'll be home for dinner one day this week. No, we should be probably like 2-ish hours
Plus Q&A.
plus or minus. Plus, yeah, we'll give you the breakdown of kind of how everything's gonna roll out. We'll talk about some cool stuff and look at some cool stuff, then we'll jump on in and yeah, leave time at the end for questions.
We'll start here in about 1 minute. Shoestack, can you check your Slack real quick?
I can.
You can stop sharing for a moment.
Got it.
You've all been saying it, but really quick before we get started, where is everybody from?
Oop,
I'd love to know.
stop the share. Stop the share.
You'd have to be Data from Star Trek to read where everyone's from. All over the world, though. I've seen pretty much, you'd think almost every country in the world represented here. Very cool. Wow.
Someone's spamming India.
Someone's really loving India. We got it.
Yeah, there's a lot of folks from India.
We got
I
it.
think it's one person from
Oh,
India
it's
who's
one person.
really fast at pasting.
Trying to represent the entire country population.
Hello, New York. Hello, LA.
Where are you from, Julia?
I'm from Brooklyn, New York.
Ah,
Yeah, but I'm in LA now. That's where I'm living. Where are you guys, Caleb, Rob, and Rob?
I'm in Utah.
Oh, beautiful.
Beautiful state.
Still holding it down here in New York for you, Julia.
Hell yeah, Rob.
You know,
Yeah.
we gotta make sure that the bagels are being made and the pizza is still good. So
Yeah. Oh gosh, yeah.
I'm taking care of it.
Pizza
You
and
found
bagel.
Is there like good pizza in LA? Have you found good pizza?
You know what? There's actually a Roberta's here.
Ooh.
Yeah, they have one like really close to where I live.
Wow.
So that's been pretty cool. There's also a Baston chain around here called Upper Crust,
Okay.
which is apparently Boston native and really, really good.
All right.
How
With
you, Rob?
this. All right with the spamming in chat. No more
Oh,
spamming.
Yeah, I'm just
We
gonna
got your
guys.
countries.
I already removed Shiva. Let's not the ban ham will come down for that much, man.
Cool.
All right.
Are we ready to begin?
Let's do it. Let me make sure I got this and this. I'll share the
Who's
screen.
ready to get started? One's in chat if you're ready to go. You beautiful people. Welcome to SIGFest 2024. It's almost May. The flowers are starting to grow. Julia could write a prompt to the oration I'm giving right now in a split second. Welcome, everybody. Glad you're here. We love doing these events for you all. And very excited that you've taken some time out of your day to come learn. You're interested in sync licensing, how that world works. I think all of us, Rob, have you done much sync stuff personally?
I've heard of it.
Not you, the other
Oh.
Rob.
Me?
Yeah.
No, I'd say that's the area I'm like least familiar with.
I've done a lot of sync stuff. I've worked with, I've had stuff with Coke and Cadillac, Intel, a bunch of other companies. Obviously, Rob Shoestack is here with us today. He is the mentor for the sync program at mastering.com. We're an online school for engineers and producers. He runs all of our sync stuff, and we have Julie here today as well. Julia, I guess you go by Julia Piker. And
That's
Rob
what I
can
go by,
introduce
yeah.
her. Yeah,
My
you go
name.
by that. 'Cause
Yeah. Well,
By the way, Caleb, you froze because you did a thumbs up and Zoom thought you were trying to
Uh,
do animation.
Love
There
that.
you
Always makes me look great too.
go. It's always the best possible
the best
freeze
pose.
frame.
Yeah, and I'm the so in terms of introductions, really quick, my name is Caleb Lovelace. I'm the director of education for mastering.com. Again, we have Rob Shustak here, who's the mentor for our sync program. He also has a long pedigree of boy, I try to fit your credits and everything on a single page, and it's hard to do. Who are the biggest? What's the biggest stuff you've done, Rob?
Oh, working with a lot of stuff in the ad space, folks like Febreze and Chase and Verizon, Amazon, Google, those kind of people.
Just a few small little companies there.
Couple.
We have Rob Mazes here today. He's the CEO and owner of mastering.com. He's been online educating and creating space for engineers and producers for over 10 years now. He was one of the OGs to do it a long time ago, and he built mastering.com and gathered a team of people. And we believe we're putting forth the best education in the audio production engineering space right now. And we're very proud of that. And then I'd love for Rob Shustak to introduce us to Julia.
Yeah, we're super excited that Julia Piker is with us. Julia is an award-winning Ukrainian American composer. Lots and lots of credits across all the medias, right? Film, TV, advertising. She's got them all. Some you may have heard her in. FX's Murder at the End of the World, Amazon's Outer Range. What else do we have? Hulu's Unbanned: The Legend of AJ1, which premiered at the Tribeca Film Festival. Julia just worked on a project that was it at Sundance, Julia?
I'm in the middle of finishing up scoring an 8-episode series called Penelope
Sweet.
for the Duplass brothers. So that should be on everyone's radar probably in a couple of months. Yeah.
That's awesome. And there's, things like Ozark on Netflix and Tulsa King with Sly and all the cool ad stuff that you've done as well. We have a bunch of brands in common that we've worked on: BMW, Wendy's, Adobe, Vanity
Yeah.
Fair. I see you've worked on. That's awesome. So yeah, I mean, Julia's got amazing credits. She's an incredible composer. And I didn't know roots back to your grandfather, who was a musician with the Russian Philharmonic.
Yeah, I come from a long line of winds players, actually, which is funny because I don't play pretty much any wind instruments aside from maybe the recorder,
Nice.
which I'm sure all of us know how to play. But yeah, my dad's dad was a saxophonist and clarinetist in the Russian Philharmonic, and then his father was a tuba player for the Kremlin. So long line of Soviet Union musicians who tried to actually bring that work to the U.S. As well. So I kind of feel like I'm living a bit of like a legacy, and you know, I wish they could see sort of what I'm doing now. So that's pretty cool.
Very cool.
It's great to have you here. Thanks, Rob. Thanks, Julia. Other Rob. And of course, welcome to our sponsors and people from Spitfire Audio. They've been so gracious and helping us put this together, make it free for everybody. We all know and love Spitfire Audio. They make some of the best stuff around. Julia will be using them throughout this 3 days as we listen to her stuff. Just they're an incredible partner for us, and we just really love them and appreciate their goals and visions as a company. So shout out to Spitfire Audio. It's a huge reason why a lot of you are here. So you probably love them too. And I gave introductions. So
Yeah.
Rob, I'm going to hand it over to you. Tell us how this is
Cool.
going to work.
Let's do it. So, quick look at the Sync Fest schedule. We are here on day 1. So, today is composition breakdown day. So, what we're going to do is we're going to take a look at a composition, actually 2 cues. Cues are just kind of fancy speak for tracks. That Julia composed against a short film that she provided. So we're going to look under the hood. We're going to see how she put those compositions together. We're going to talk about what the emotional intention was. We're going to talk about different kinds of ways that we can tap into those emotions, help to enhance those emotions, and see how it's done. It's a real look behind the curtain of the way this stuff is put together. On day 2, we're going to shift gears a little bit. Same intention. We're going to be looking at how do we drive that emotional connection? How do we make that emotional impact? But we're going to be doing it through the lens of looking through a catalog. So we're going to explore some library tracks. You guys will also have the opportunity at the end of today to submit some of your pre-existing music that we can try to put against picture, see what kind of emotion we get, see what changes. The goal here is to really, one, look at your existing music, your catalog of music as opportunities for sync music. It's looking at them through an emotional lens as opposed to just saying, oh, here are some songs I have lying around, right? They all have potential and they all have the ability for you to start to categorize them, start to catalog them, and look at them through this emotional lens of creative and emotional intention. So we're going to do that on day 2. And then on day 3, kind of the unspoken hero of the sync space, we are going to take Julia's original composition and we're going to put a full-on mix and master to it. So we're going to see how that composition that already achieves this high level of emotional connection, this really connective and emotive existence, and we're going to watch it take even more shape, gain even deeper connection when we put a proper mix and master on it, right? Just by tweaking some of the sounds, some of the relationship between the instruments, we're going to really deepen and enhance that emotional connection. So that'll be really cool to watch that come to life. For those who have been to mastering.com events before, Jake, the mastering.com hometown mixing and mastering hero from Fix the Mix, will be here putting the mixing and mastering touches on the tracks. So that's what we have in store for you. And how are we going to break it down each day? Give or take, we're going to do about 10 to 15 minutes of philosophy. I'm going to walk you all through some ideas and concepts that will help you get a feel for the sync space. I know that some of you, this is kind of your first soiree into the space, if you will. Some of you are vets. We're going to talk about some kind of little tips and tricks, as well as just some information to introduce you to the space and get you better equipped. Our goal is to help you walk away more confident and a more valuable partner within the sync space. We're going to discuss some philosophies around how we do that. Then we're going to jump into the main event, the really cool stuff. We're going to have Julia open up her session, and we're going to walk through track by track. We're going to see how she created all of these pieces, all of these tracks. We're going to see what her thought process was, what some of her production techniques are. We're going to talk about compositional ideas, and we're going to be relating back to a creative brief and understanding how that brief can help to guide us in our creative process. After we walk through the session, we'll recap, we'll talk about what we're doing for the following day. And then we got about 15, 30 minutes of Q&A. We'll answer all of your burning questions about sync space, production tips, tricks, all those types of things. We'll address all of them. So with that in mind, I think we're good to jump right in. Caleb, are there any questions popping up that I need to address before we jump in?
Nope, everyone's excited.
So am I.
Keep going.
Sweet. All right, awesome. Well, what is sync? Good question. Keynote slide. What is sync? So sync is literally just music that's created for or paired with visuals. So what do I mean when I say that? When I say created for, that means it's custom created for a specific visual, for a specific project, right? You might hear that called original composition or an original score. So we're starting from scratch. We're usually working to a creative brief or some conversation that's going to guide us in our creative path, but we're creating it from nothing and developing it from the ground up. And that's what we're going to be looking at with Julia today, what she created for the visuals we will be looking at. So that's what it is to be created for a pair of visuals or paired with visuals. What does that mean? You might hear that called licensed, right? Music supervision or a catalog search. So that's taking an existing piece of music and then licensing it, putting it against the visuals to fit into what's happening. The outcome is really the same, right? But it's two different ways to approach it, and we'll get a little bit deeper into that. So music that's created for or paired with visuals for any kind of media, right? And the traditional ones that we often think about: film, television, advertising, video games, right? So we're doing a film score, we have a TV theme or a cue. Again, a cue is just a piece of music that's being used within a visual. Cue of music for an action scene or a love scene, right? Advertising, we use all different kinds of music. We might use a music bed. We might have a mnemonic, which is just kind of like a sonic ID or an audio tag, right? Think about Netflix or McDonald's, ba-da-ba-ba-ba. We also have full-on scores like you would for film and TV, right? These are all forms of art, right? Even the advertising, we're all trying to produce a final creative project that is a piece of art that speaks to people. Okay, same thing in video games. Could be in-game, could be a trailer for the video game, could be a menu page, but there are all these touch points where music and sound exists. Same thing with some newer or different areas that a lot of people don't think about when you think about air quote traditional sync music, right? Social media, obviously. So any social content while you're scrolling, and videos, influencers, brands, all sorts of people obviously have content online. They use it in social. Any piece of music that's behind that content, sync music. Same thing with podcasts, right? The podcast that you're binging right now, that theme song, I'm willing to bet that you could, without even thinking about it, hum the theme song. You probably do so while driving or showering or walking down the street. It happens to me all the time, and I just start humming a theme. Podcasts, right? Online content, same thing with streaming, and then corporate events as well, right? Live corporate events, working with different brands, corporations, they're creating content. And this could be anything from things that are living on their website, so that feeds into the online arena as well. Or when you think about different areas that might not be native to sync, right? Working with HR companies, HR personnel, when we're talking about recruitment videos, when you're talking about how do you differentiate yourself in a crowd of other brands, right? When you're trying to attract content, when you're trying to attract talent, I should say, you have content that you put out there to attract the right kind of person to hire, right? Majority of that's going to have some music to it. And we need to provide that music. So these are all the different kinds of medias, and even more than this, right? But these are just some that I wanted to call to your attention. So what is the goal of sync, right? We understand kind of what it is now in a very broad sense. And the goal of sync is really to just use music to enhance the overall creative impact of a visual project. So what does that mean? The most important piece that I want you to really remember and take away is that music is playing a role in a larger creative piece, right? So all put together, there should be this cohesiveness. We are contributing to the ultimate impact that we could possibly make with this piece of creative, right? And the music is there to enhance that impact. It's there to help deepen the emotional connection that you're making with an audience. It's helped to assist in telling the story that this piece of content or this project is out to tell. And it helps to strengthen the creative intention of the project, right? So when we have a piece of content, and that could be anything from the media that we were just looking at, from an advertisement to a film to a documentary to an HR video attracting top talent, right? We're trying to deepen that emotional connection. We're trying to understand and connect on a very human level. We're telling a story, and we're using music to help amplify that story. What's our vibe? What's the feel? What's the voice of our story that we're trying to tell? Is it very passionate and loud, borderline aggressive? Is it very subdued? Is it more introspective and thoughtful? What is that voice, and how do we use music to help tell that story through that voice? And how do we help strengthen that creative intention? When you set out to create a piece of content or tell a story, it's crucial that you have creative intention, right? What is the goal of the story, of the content, of whatever it is that you're putting out? And I really want to focus on that first and foremost, right? I want to talk about the importance of really clear creative intention. And in order to do that, I want to use an example. And this is a sync webinar, so we'll use a film example. It shows a very small indie film. Some of you may know, some of you may not. It's called Star Wars. I can't see the chat, but I'm assuming that people recognize Star Wars.
Yeah,
So,
what's Star Wars?
so good question, Caleb. Star Wars. No, but in all seriousness, right? If someone were to ask you to explain what Star Wars is, I bet a lot of you would say, "Oh, it's this really amazing kind of sci-fi film. It takes place a long time ago, but in a galaxy far, far away. So it's like futuristic, and there's robots, and there's flying vehicles, and there's lightsabers, and there's like all of this crazy stuff, and it's so futuristic and lasers and all of this stuff, right? So with that in mind, just if you look at it totally objectively based on that description, you say, oh, all right, well, I imagine it might sound kind of futuristic, right? Some synths, electronic stuff, boops and beeps, those types of vibes. We all know, obviously, that is not the case with Star Wars, right? Star Wars has this beautiful, sweeping orchestral score that's ingrained in all of us and in pop culture. I'm willing to bet, however, that some of the studio executives at some point probably had a conversation and were like, George, we should. I don't know why my studio exec sounds like a
That sounds
1930, like a 1930s cartoon villain. Listen here, George. So, they're trying to target a specific audience, right? It's the 1970s. They're probably having some conversations like, look, I get it. The score, John Williams, sure, I hear he's great. What about some of this synthesizer music? Let's talk to the kids. Let's do some of the pop music that the kids are listening to on the hi-fi stereo and whatnot.
Let's get Pink Floyd to score it.
Let's get Pink Floyd to score it, right? That is probably a conversation that came up. And what would have happened if that was the case? Let's look and see.
I want to learn the ways of the Force and become a Jedi like my father.
You can go your own way.
When I left you, I was but the learner. Now I am the master.
Only a master of evil, Darth.
Oh man. And I like that the Pink Floyd thing totally off the cuff, right? But it makes sense. So I understand.
I would have taken Slow Ride at that last scene, maybe, of all those.
Yeah,
I'm
I would
feeling
have kept that.
Right? Chewbacca was feeling it. But there's a reason, right? And it seems silly, right? And it feels comical only because, like I said, the John Williams score is so ingrained in our being and in pop culture and kind of inextricably connected to Star Wars that it seems kind of like almost like a joke to see anything on top of it. But when you zoom out a little bit and you look at it totally objectively from a music supervision standpoint, right? Just talking about taking pieces of music and putting it against picture, all of those theoretically could have worked thematically, vibe wise, right? The slow ride at the end, the vibe is there. It's got swagger, there's confidence in that, right? It's kind of like it's got this innate strut to it. Excuse me. So it all fits in there, right? And having Pink Floyd score this or having Philip Glass come in and do a totally like interstellar, wild interpretive kind of score could have totally made sense. So why did George Lucas insist on this amazing, beautiful, sweeping score using orchestral music? Well, one of the reasons is because Star Wars was written as a space opera. Okay, George Lucas sat down with the creative intention to write a space opera. And a space opera is literally defined as a subgenre of science fiction that emphasizes science fictional space warfare with use of melodramatic, risk-taking space adventures and chivalric romance. So, yeah, that kind of fits for Star Wars, right? So it's starting to make a lot more sense. We're starting to understand how his creative intention, right, helps to enhance this overall project. Okay. There's also the reality that orchestral music is timeless, right? It just kind of exists in this void. Is it old? Yeah. Is there new scoring? Yeah. Does it always feel old when you score with orchestral music? No. But do you always know that it's orchestral? Yeah. Right. So it just has this timeless essence, right? And how smart of George Lucas to say, listen, I'm writing this story that I want to be timeless, and the themes within it are timeless, and the operatic themes within it are timeless, and I want that to show through. That is my intention. That is the intent of my creative, right? So with Star Wars in mind, we revisit this idea of what is the goal of sync, and it's using music to enhance the overall creative project of the visual. Does the music, does a sweeping classical score help to enhance the creative impact? I'd say it does. And I think a couple people agreed. Right? Does it deepen the emotional connection? I think it absolutely does, right? And that's we can see that when we watch Star Wars and hear kind of like the Emperor's March theme, right? And we get a bit of frisson where the hair on our arms stand up. We feel emotionally invested, right? These are human themes, these are emotional themes that we could all relate to. And it's all being connected through music, right? The visuals are telling the story that we're seeing, and the music is helping us to feel it, to connect to it, right? Does it assist in helping to tell the story? It does, right? For all the reasons that we just talked about, making it timeless, having a clear impact, understanding that the goal is to tell a space opera story, a timeless operatic story. So it assists in telling that story. And does it strengthen the creative intention? I think I've said it like 87 times. So I'm going to go with yes. I'll say it the 88th time, deepening that creative intent and really just helping to drive home all of the pieces that George Lucas set out to do. So
I think it's good to keep coming back to, and it's like I think these concepts are pretty easy to wrap your mind around. Yes, we need to emit emotion. We need to understand the creative intention of something. But I've sat on quite a few panels and I've worked with execs enough times to know that this stuff is what they get really specific and neurotic about. And even stuff that sounded pretty good, I've seen two major reasons why people reject stuff. One, sometimes the mix and master doesn't sound good. It
Mhm.
just gets discarded, even if it was like the perfect stuff. Or number two, it just, they weren't really dialed in with that emotional connection and that creative intention. And it's easier said than done to do that. It's like almost a lifelong pursuit of
Yeah.
understanding how to do that better and better and better. So there's always room to grow in these things as foundational, as core as they are. There's no one that's perfect at this stuff. And so talking about this stuff is exactly the right way to start here.
Yeah, totally agree. And it's a really good point. And I also think it's a testament to something we'll talk about in a little bit. But again, I mentioned it up top, being a part of a larger creative piece, right? And understanding what that creative vision is and how do you help to bring that vision to life. And like Caleb said, I think a lot of people might say like, oh, well, this is how I would do it. And I think just to be in kind of a bubble or operate in a vacuum and say, here's how I think this should be, um, usually doesn't end with the best results, right? Understanding the bigger picture is really what's going to, despite some popular belief, it's going to open up creative opportunities as opposed to limit them. We'll talk about that in a little bit. And we're going to dive in by talking about creative briefs, right? So this is one of the best ways that we understand creative intention, and it's with a creative brief. What is a creative brief? It's basically a list of do's and don'ts that help align various creative partners. So the music supervisor, the producer, the director, the showrunner, somebody is going to the producer in at an ad agency, or the client themselves are going to say, here's what I'm thinking about, here's what I want, here's my creative intention, right? And it's important to have that clarity, really understand what are we trying to get to? What is the emotion you're trying to convey? And here's some ways that I suggest doing it. And here's some ways we don't want to do that, right? And some examples of that, just really quickly, would be um, I don't want there to be vocals, right? I want to convey this feeling of timeless love and relationship, but I don't want to do it through vocals. That's not what's going to carry it for me. Okay, so now we have a clue, we have an idea. Great. We're going to need to evoke that emotion. We're going to need to go down that creative lane, but we're not going to have vocals to kind of literally spell it out for us. So how are we going to approach that? And we're going to talk a lot about that with Julia as she walks us through her process and shows us how she was creating and why she was making the moves that she did to create these emotions. So list of do's and don'ts, right? An example of do's, we did an example of don'ts. Let's do an example of do's would be, hey, I really want to use orchestral music. I want to have some really beautiful woodwind and stringed instruments in there to help create this kind of timeless and very emotive kind of vibe, right? Okay, so now we know, great, I understand the world that I'm working in or starting off in, as far as grabbing instruments. And now what am I going to do with these instruments in order to evoke these emotions, knowing that I don't have lyrics to help inform what that story is or what that emotion is. So a creative brief really helps to establish a creative language, right? You have a bunch of different creative partners, like we said, and we're all working towards this ultimate creative goal. So one important thing is to all get on the same page about what the emotional intention is. And sometimes there's some back and forth and dialogue about, well, what do you mean by intense, or what do you mean by beautiful? And that's all great creative dialogue to have. A good creative brief is going to really help spell it out for you. And that's where some of the do's and don'ts come in, right? And they just help you to really identify what language we're all speaking and what common goal are we all working towards together. It helps to add some objective guardrails, right? Do's and don'ts. You literally have a set of parameters to operate within, right? So you know how far you can push certain things as far as the list of do's and don'ts, or the ideas or the contributions of whoever's creating the brief, the client. And you're able to operate within there. So again, like we were talking about just before, you're not operating within a vacuum. You're not just guessing and throwing a dart at the board and saying, let's see what emotion I hit. Oh, we've got woefulness. Cool. Let's get some woe. So it helps to create those objective guardrails to operate within. And it provides a North Star, right? We're all speaking the same language. We're all operating within this kind of similar space, and we're all working towards that similar goal, using that as a North Star. So I mentioned before, sometimes we need a little bit of a shift in mindset, to help see creative briefs as liberating as opposed to confining. Because I think a lot of times we can see it as, oh, well, I'm being told what to do. I can't be creative, right? The mindset shift comes in being able to look at this as unlocking your ability to use creativity. Okay, because within these guardrails, within these parameters, and using a North Star, knowing we're not going to get lost, we then have creative freedom to work towards that endpoint however we deem fit. Okay, we understand when we're veering too far off course, but just because we're operating within a certain space doesn't mean there's one way to get there. And it doesn't mean that the best way to get there is from point A to point B, right? Maybe you veer off this way and take a wide left turn, and then you're coming back and you're doing something a little bit more down the middle. And when I talk about down the middle, I'm talking about maybe something that sounds a little safer or more expected as far as your composition or your production, right? But you're adding different pieces. Maybe when you veered off to something a little less down the middle, a little less expected, you're bringing in an element that helps to keep it interesting and creative. You're helping to weave this tale and this story into your composition, right? Because you know where you're operating within it. It helps you get your bearings, right? And then you can adopt a more creative mindset while you're working within there. Right. Does that make sense to everybody? Cool. So I like to say, in terms of having that mindset shift, it takes a bit of our being humble enough to see the forest for the trees, right? Appreciate the bigger picture for this bigger creative that we're working for. We're all a part of this kind of cohesive piece, but we have confidence in what our creative contribution is to the whole, right? We understand this larger creative vision. We understand where we fit in, and we're just kind of a cog in that creative wheel. But we have the confidence and we have the creative intention with our art, with our music, to understand how important our contributions are, because they are great. Right. And I'm not just maybe slightly biased because music is awesome, but they all work together, right? And it really does make an impact. I'll give you a quick quotation, right? Something to just process, right? Humans process sound much faster than other sensory inputs. Even our sense of sight takes longer to produce a reaction than sound does, right? And light travels faster than sound. We know that. But as far as a reaction, sound is making an impact before the visuals even have a chance to register with your brain, right? So as far as our contribution in helping to tell the story, in helping to establish this emotional connection, and in helping to really plant this creative intention, music is an amazingly important piece of that process. And it's pretty amazing to think about. So with all of that philosophy and mindset in mind, I think we're ready to dive in and take a look at it in action with Julia's composition. What do you think?
I'm pretty excited for this.
I made it extra muddy for you guys.
Oh, good.
Yeah, booming in the speakers.
Fun.
You can't handle.
Yeah, I also just want to piggyback on what Rob said. All of that was really beautifully said. There's a level of subjectivity to all of this, how you communicate emotion through music is so nuanced. You might not even realize what's happening sonically, but you do feel it. So I really love everything you said, Rob. Okay, I'm going to share my screen with y'all.
Yeah. So
Um,
while you do that, let me read. I'll kind of give you guys a quick synopsis of the visuals, the film that Julia's working to here. and then we'll start to jump in. But this is a short film called Hermanita, right, by Luis Obioha. Saying that right, Julia?
Yes.
Fantastic. So, the overall synopsis of the piece of the film is it's a story about Katerina and Jessica, who are two sisters separated by human trafficking. So it's a heavy concept, right? So already as we're reading this and starting to understand the project, we start to kind of understand the story that's being told and what kind of emotions and what kind of feelings that we can expect to feel, right? Um, After Jessica's abduction, Katrina is tasked with saving her sister from a remote lake house before she goes deeper into the trafficking ring. So we're going to be looking at back-to-back scenes here. One of them is with Jessica, who is in a living room at the lake house of her captors. She's being held there. She's guarded by a female member of this kind of cartel, this gang. And after that conversation and that dialogue, we cut to her sister, Katrina, who has made it to the lake house grounds and is fighting the main boss to get to Jessica to free her. Right. And just a little background on the characters so you guys understand going in. Katerina is a highly skilled fighter. She's unafraid to get her hands dirty. She's often getting into trouble for her abrasive nature. She's the dark horse, fearless, deeply loyal. Jessica, who is in the first scene that we were talking about, the more dramatic and intense scene, she's soft and impressionable. She's the younger sister, right? So, with all of that in mind, we start to kind of understand who these characters are. And we'll look as Julia kind of walks us through how she starts to create that. Okay. So it's, it again, understanding the basic themes, the creative intention of the filmmaker, right? That's going to help to kind of set us on our journey. And Julia, I wanted to kind of, before we jump in, just wanted to
Yeah.
kind of ask you about kind of how what is your creative process usually when you get started with something like this and you're looking at a brief, you're understanding kind of the character arcs and who they are and the story. Where do you usually jump in?
Um, well, obviously watching whatever I'm working on, is the first thing that you have to do. And normally, you want to have a really, really good dialogue with your director. Um, I think just all in all, the most important part at the start of any creative process involving work that's already been visualized or written by whoever created it is to know and to really understand the story and its characters and all of the most important components. The sort of this project has already been realized by someone else. So your job as a composer is to tell that story. And to do your research and to really have a good understanding of the intention behind everything that's written on the page, even before it goes into production. If you're lucky enough to get involved that early in the process. The music is a support system and a vessel with which to convey what is happening on the screen. So all in all, that goes to say, do your research, study the script, study what's on the screen, and have really, really strong and good dialogue with your director. This particular film, and the reason I found it to be really special to share here today is because Luis Obioha, the director, actually passed away before this short film actually got to have its festival run. And so I thought it would be really special. And I know that he would have really appreciated that Hermanita sort of lives on beyond his, time on this earth with us. And so it's really special for me to get to share this with you guys today. Lewis was very, very into really big, fun action sequences. And almost every project he ever did or ever wrote always had really strong female protagonists. So it was really important to him to bring on a woman identifying composer to help him to tell the story. The initial process of scoring this, the score was actually much more subdued and much sort of softer. It wasn't accentuating all of the action in the way that you guys are about to hear, that I sort of rescored it. And that's because I had access to these amazing Spitfire material, which I used a lot of. I'm using Spitfire Albion 1, Tundra. I'm using a Spitfire U-phone that I've had for a couple of years that I use a lot. Yeah, a lot of really great Spitfire samples that I'm using here. And so I really wanted to sort of up the ante and sort of up that up the action sequences with some more movement and some busier vibes. So my process here in rescoring it and you guys are going to see when we watch is there's two distinct sections here. Like Rob had mentioned before, we have a section where we see Jessica, who's just been unfortunately drugged by the kingpin Rick. He, you know, gave her something, she took it, and now she's sort of in this trance-like state where she's really drugged up and really not super aware of where she is. And so you'll sort of hear a lot of sustained tension at the very beginning of this cue, and then moving directly into a fight scene with Katerina and Rick, where she is fighting to basically get to the lake house and save her sister. So sonically, you'll hear sort of some quieter moments, which I love. I love space. I love working with space. I sometimes when I'm writing, I like to overwrite and then pull back. So you'll hear here that sort of the beginning section of this is a little bit more subdued. There's a lot of like kind of drones. There's a lot of like sustained, you know, tape bass that I'm using here. And then you'll also hear some really cool vocalization. I wanted to infuse some feminine qualities here. You know, this is two female protagonists, two really strong characters. So I wanted to make sure that I was sort of, you know, musically characterizing it as a story of women. So yeah, I guess we should jump in.
Yeah,
Right?
that's awesome. And it's really also great to hear, you know, how you're talking about, you know, originally it was a little more subdued. And I love this concept of overscoring and being able to pull back a little bit. And I think that's really great advice overall, is
Yeah.
just really leaning in. And I think for me, that really shows that creative intention, right? And that direction and understanding where you're going. And it's easier to pull it back a little bit and say, oh, well, let's take this out. It's easier to do that than it is to ask the client to say, well, imagine if I did more, you know, we can fill it out. So it's
Yeah.
I think in general for your clients, it's easier, it's a little more palatable to give them the opportunity to say, let's dial it back a little bit, than to ask them to make the creative leap to say, oh, well, I want more, I think.
Yeah.
Right.
It's also great when, you know, a lot of times I'll have a director come into the studio with me. And it's always great to not have to then sit with the director and do writing in the session. It's always better if I have a lot of material written that I can mute or pull back on, or I don't know, put a low pass filter on. Just more material is always better. So I always say go extra and then pull back.
Love that. Yeah.
Here, yeah, here we're doing a lot of stuff. And I did want to provide you guys with a bunch of material because, you know, as you know, what you're here for is that we're going to mix this track. So
Right on. Before we jump in, just a quick warning. You know, the visual, this is a real film. So there are intense visuals, there are scenes of fighting, there's gunshots, yes. So just, letting everybody know if anybody is sensitive to that kind of content, you can turn off the video and just kind of listen in, or yeah, just wanted to make everybody aware, and we'll see how the volume is for everybody as well. But just that quick caveat as we jump in.
Yeah, and Rob, if I'm playing it back and you're hearing that it's too loud, since I can't see what folks are saying right now, just shoot me a
Yes.
text and I'll fix the levels over
You
here.
got it.
Okay.
Okay. Great. You know what? I think let's watch through, if you could, just dialogue and effects first.
Sure.
And I think then, everyone can kind of start to create a little soundscape in their minds as they watch along. And then we can see kind of what you created and how different or similar it is to the scores we create in our minds. So take
Hell
it
yeah.
away.
Yep. Subjectivity is fun, y'all.
Yeah.
Okay, here's just the dialogue in FX.
Julia, we need the
Hey.
video screen.
Oh, you guys don't see it.
No.
Try sharing your whole desktop.
Give me 1 second. Sorry, guys. Please hold.
I like Robert's got the quick command, the Control 9. It's a zoom setting issue.
Is it?
Well,
Okay, so
I
this
think
is my Pro Tools. I'm
You're making sure you
sharing.
share sound and stereo
yeah,
sound.
there we go.
Can
There
you
it
guys see
is.
this?
Yep.
Okay, great.
Thanks, Julia.
Hey. You should eat. You'll need your energy for when the boss arrives. Girl, you okay? Damn. You're pretty fucked up, huh? I could just put you out of your misery. Rick?
All right. So yes, we know no music. Just to restate, we were watching that one through just dialogue and some sound design, right? So we could see it's super intense. And I think it's going to be really awesome to watch that come together. Were you guys able to start kind of in your minds kind of hearing different pieces that you would have done, different moves to maybe accentuate some of the tension, accentuate some of those character arcs like Julia was talking about.
Yeah.
Cool. All right, well, let's listen through with what Julia's put together for us.
Okay. Some folks are saying it's loud.
Was a little loud. Probably we can turn the output down a little.
Okay, gotcha. Yeah, so do you guys want to hear what I wrote first and then you'd like me to talk about it, or should I kind of just go into some of the instrumentation?
Yeah, I think let's listen to it through first, and then I'd love to dive in. So just kind of experience it as a whole, and then we can go track by track.
Yep.
We
Sounds
also
good.
we also know the frame rate's a little choppy on the video. Don't worry about it too much. Just get the best picture of it that you can.
Yeah. Not so sure that I can go any better than that. Unless you can
Probably a Zoom. It's probably a Zoom thing.
Yeah.
But I got enough of the picture of that scene.
Yeah.
Okay. Steph Zoom. Okay, people are saying they seem to be cool with that.
Yeah, you're good.
Okay. Yeah, let's listen through.
Let's do it.
Hey. You should eat. You'll need your energy for when the boss arrives. Girl, you okay? Damn. You're pretty fucked up, huh? I could just put you out of your misery. Rick?
Nice.
That's awesome.
I loved all of that.
Hmm.
Julia, you were totally right about the female vocal thing. You're such a perfect touch.
Yep.
That really got me.
Yeah, luckily I get to do a lot of that in my score work. I'm going to show you guys kind of a couple of ways that I actually used vocals, which I encourage everyone to do. Use vocals when you don't have the instrument to make the sound. Even if you can't sing, sometimes the things that you can do with your voice, you can create percussion, you can make interesting, low tones, drones, things like that. I'll kind of show you where I did that here. But yeah, if you guys are ready, I'm gonna start breaking down the score.
Yeah, let's do that. And that is, I just want to highlight that again. That's such a pro tip. Use your vocals, work that in. And one thing that's amazing for in every media, it adds instant human connection because our ears connect with other human sounds, and it makes us feel more emotionally invested. One of the things that jumps out at me from the first downbeat of watching this cue with Julia's score is it's so much more engaging, right? And the story is the story, and it's there, and the emotional and the creative intention is there, but seeing it come to life with the score and feeling really more connected, more deeply connected, more invested in the story of the characters, all because of the music, is something that's just amazing and fascinating. And I love that about this space in music.
Yeah. Kenny, yeah,
Yeah.
there were Vox in there, but they sounded kind of like synths sometimes. And to add to that, 1,000% agree. The human voice is the most interesting instrument, and it's the most probably emotional instrument to connect to as human beings. So I totally agree. If you don't have an instrument, find a way to use the voice to do that thing. It's a very, very cool touch. That's a huge golden nugget right there.
Yeah.
Love
Yeah.
it.
Yeah, I really do love to track vocals and then destroy them, basically. Um,
Awesome. Well, show us where did you start? So you got this, you have your idea, right? We have a bit of a creative brief just in understanding what the storyline is, some of the character arcs. Where does your mind go first?
yeah, so I like to put myself in the space that we're in, right? We're in this sort of like desolate, remote lake house. And, later on in the film, you discover that there are a lot more women being enslaved there. So obviously in this story, we have Jessica laying here. Like I said before, she's just been drugged by the leader, Rick. So she's in this room, she's laying on this couch, totally drugged out of her mind. And if I just kind of put myself in that space with her, I imagine it's really quiet. I imagine that the women being kept in the other room are being forced to keep quiet. So I wanted to sort of address the tension in the room by creating a couple of different stacks of sustained drone sounds. I also have some really awesome Albion Tundra string tremolos happening here. I don't know if you can hear them, super
Yeah.
quiet. Some traveling tremolos, which are always fun, especially like some higher string tremolos to give that sort of added tension. So all in all, this beginning half before we go into Katarina fighting Rick, I really wanted it to feel really intimate and really dark and really eerie. So how do we achieve that? Of course, everyone is a different kind of writer. There's a level of subjectivity to all of this. Everything is nuanced when it comes to the kind of scores you do. But for me, it was important to highlight the moments here where we could potentially feel fear, right? When we hear the gunshot, I wanted to create those stop moments, and also to highlight the tension. So what I used here was some really cool tape bass, some Albion Tundra tremolo strings. I also have a Euphone going here. And I also have a very slow, just like a stacks and stacks of drones, you guys. I don't know how else to explain it, but
Cool.
aside from that, I do have this really sweet little ambient piano melody where I'm using Omnisphere ambient piano. So if you have Omnisphere, use the ambient piano. It's beautiful and it's really soft. It is effectively a felted piano. And it comes with it's pre-sustained, so you don't even really have to use a sustain pedal on it, and it's really beautiful and soft. And I thought it kind of added to sort of the feminine quality here.
Yeah.
And then on top of that, I thought kind of a cool element to add here was this really beautiful, it almost kind of sounds like a bell or church bells. And I thought that played really interestingly against the white dress that she's wearing, which feels, for lack of a better word, sort of virginal. So I added these Albion 1 aluminum plucks. You can hear those. They give that feel, like that church-like feeling, but
Yeah.
also give that sort of feeling of like desperation or death or like mourning something. And in a way, I think, you know, Katerina here, or I'm sorry, Jessica here is sort of mourning the life she once had. She's, you know, she's enslaved now and she doesn't know what's going to happen. So yeah, so this beginning part, just to reiterate, sustained tension, adding a little bit of color with the piano and with the aluminum bells, and then sprinkling here and there with some drone sounds, with the tape bass, and with the high tremolo strings. And then, as you heard when I first played, just making sure nothing here is soloed, having that abrupt stop when she lifts the gun, because as the viewer, we don't know what's about to happen.
Yeah.
Right? It does, like, for me at least, it does kind of give me that feeling in my chest of like, oh, holy shit. I hope she
Right.
doesn't shoot her right now.
Right.
And then I wanted to also emphasize some of these vocals that are happening here. When Jessica really slowly turns her body, I was thinking, ooh, it would be cool to do a vocal bend. I kind of wasn't in the mood to pick up a violin that moment, so I sort of just sang it. And I thought it really played beautifully with the physicality of the way she sort of slowly turns her body in this drugged up state. Yeah, so, you know, just talking about this front section, that was sort of my biggest intention, was to get us in the room, you know, play off of the sound effects we have here, the sort of lack of dialogue. And I would think, honestly, normally when there is a lack of dialogue, you'd think, you know, I need to fill that space. I need to keep things busy sonically when there's nothing going on, you know, with dialogue and sound effects. But I think instinctually here for me, the quieter, the better. That like low buzz tone feels really eerie, kind of gross, kind of spooky in a way.
Yeah. I love that idea. And I think the way you're talking about it also, right? Sitting in silence
Mhm.
is uncomfortable, right?
Oh,
And I think you're right? Our instinct just in everyday dialogue with people is to fill the silence, is to kind of not let there be those uncomfortable gaps in dialogue or something to say. People get
yes.
fidgety and uncomfortable, and what do you have to do something, right? So I love taking that approach from a composition standpoint and understanding that some of that tension that you're building exists in those spaces, and
Mhm.
helping again to highlight that very, very human, very shared experience of being uncomfortable when there is a silence that feels like it needs to be filled.
Yes.
That's really cool.
Yes. Yeah.
So with stacking your drones, can you
Yeah.
talk a little bit about um, kind of how you get a feel for when you've reached that emotional impact that you feel like, okay, I think I've got enough, or oh, I want to reach something else. What's your thought process, and kind of as you're building those, what's guiding you to reach for this sound and then pair it with that sound?
Yeah. I always love to start out with the lowest drone first, I guess specifically speaking about scoring this piece. I like to start with the low drone and get a feel for what I want that to sound like. And here, this tape bass, which is what I'm using as sort of like the lowest drone we have, the lowest bass tone we have, I guess, is, we're calling them all drones, but they're effectively, this is a bass tone.
Yeah.
Being processed through a tape player. So it kind of has that sort of tremolatory, not sure that's a word, tremolo feel,
It
that
is
sort
now.
of shaky feel. Yeah.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
turned it
yeah.
up, you'll sort of hear it's shaky. It almost feels like, you know, you're playing a note on a synth and then you've actually reversed it. So it's creepy, and it also, there are little kind of like pieces of it that are a little bit more warped. So I just love I love using the bass as like the first tone that you play with, and then build things on top of that. Second tone I used here was this Albion Tundra Traveling Trends, I think they're called, which is like, you know, really, really soft, probably a group of violins that are playing very, very soft tremolos. You can hear some harmonics in there, which I love. Those like high harmonics sort of add to that tension even more.
Yeah.
They're both sitting on top of each other, sort of softly underscoring the current of tension here. So those two are in play. And then this slow drone here to kind of introduce us to Jessica.
Hmm.
You know, that like very, very soft quiver of her lip. I don't know if you guys can hear that. I mean, see that. That tiny little detail, you know, and I feel like if the music was any louder, or if the music is any bit busier, you wouldn't be able to see these like really tiny, you know, physicalizations that she's exhibiting and acting out.
Hey.
I also wanted that low piano note, or I'm sorry, that low aluminum bell note to sort of land when we cut to her on the couch, seeing that perspective of her fully.
Hey. You should eat. You'll need your energy for when the boss arrives. Girl, you okay?
And also, this tone right here, kind of playing on when she sort of sees that Jessica's kind of messed up.
Girl, you okay?
I also want to tell you guys, the reason that I committed these into waveforms is because it would have been quite busy for you guys to just be looking at all the MIDI. So I did disable and hide all of the MIDI above the printed waveforms, for those of you asking. And then, yeah, so moving along the timeline here, we have our drones, we have our bass, we have our tremolos, we have our euphone.
Real quick, Julia, sorry, the drone that you introduced, I just saw some people asking, and I'm curious as well, the quiver, what instrument did you use to create that?
Quiver.
Up
You guys
a little bit.
need-
There it is.
Where was that? Oh, the slow drone, the Spitfire. Yes, that was, I believe I used the Albion 1 for that. Let me
Cool.
open this for you so that you can see. It's the B-Roll grid, which is basically a drone grid. It's pretty cool. It comes on the Albion Tundra sample pack from Spitfire.
Sweet.
Spitfire.
Yeah, and I love that, and I love the way that you're thinking about it in terms of introducing these characters, right? And truly scoring what we're seeing, right? And just in terms of going back to what we initially spoke about enhancing the emotional and creative impact. This
Yeah.
is, a master class in how to do that, in looking at those little nuanced differences and those little nuanced pieces, because that's where a lot of the emotion lives, right? That's where a lot of that human connectivity that we feel lives, in those moments. The same way Julia was talking about kind of the spaces that exist and creating the environment, right? That's how we start to establish our relationship with it. And it's really awesome just to watch it come to life with these little moments.
Yeah, it is quite bare to watch it without any music. Um, uh, so yeah, this section over here, where we are about to cut to the Katerina fight scene, we've got some risers going on, because we have this stop here with her picking up the gun, which I really wanted to highlight. I didn't in my original score, and then I decided to here again because I had all of this amazing material from Spitfire that I really wanted to play around with.
Interesting. Do you remember the thought process in the original one? What were you thinking about kind of not doing that?
I had the sustained tension playing through until we hear the shot. Until she turns her head. I didn't really highlight the lifting of the gun. I think in the original score, I remember Lewis, the director, temped most of the score with Ozark, and I had done a little bit of work on Ozark, and the score was very muted. It wasn't really doing a lot of, I know in action movies, there's a lot of sort of highlighting of every single thing that goes on, every single punch, every single kick. In the original score, I think he really wanted the score to be quite subdued, and he wanted the action and, the acting to sort of, do what it does and create the sort of feel. And so I didn't do as much like punching of specific moments and highlighting of specific moments in the original score than I did here. I wanted to illustrate it a bit more. I wanted to give it, I wanted to do, again, I wanted to do as much as I could, and then, have you guys like be able to have more material to mess around with.
It's awesome. And I love kind of how you've set it up as like a false riser almost, where you feel like something like, oh, what is about to happen? And it kind of culminates and then drops you back down, right? It's a very roller coaster kind of effect, where it's kind of playing with your emotions physically and mentally. I think that's it's really awesome.
Which is really fun. It's, you do that a lot when you're scoring horror films, like there are a lot of jump scares that you as a composer have to write, and a lot of times, even after like scoring a cue with a massive jump scare and coming back to that cue for revisions however many times you need to, an effective jump scare scored properly will scare you every time you come back to it. So I do love the space that we've created here. It really does freak me out when I watch her lift that gun. We really do feel that fear for Jessica. We don't know what's going to happen to her. And, I just wanted to up the ante a little bit here.
Right on. Yeah.
And, originally working on it before and getting it ready for the festival circuit, he wanted the music to feel a certain way, and that's my job as a composer, is to reflect the vision of the director and to tell the story that the director wanted to tell. And here I get to do whatever I want. So
there you go. There you go.
So moving on, right?
Yeah.
So we have, just to reiterate, these two interruptions here.
I could just put you out of your misery.
I'm going to stop it there really quick, right? So we have that riser over here leading up to the gun stop, and we have another riser here that's going to lead us into the fight scene with Katerina. I think, you know, musically, I am narrating that this whole section right here, we are feeling Jessica's anger start to rise. And then we see that anger expressed through the fight scene in Katerina. You know, this film is sort of telling the story of these two sisters who are so emotionally connected and so emotionally invested in each other, and have grown up really, really close. And I sort of love that we see Jessica, if you can see her, she's kind of upside down, getting really angry here, and then cutting to the Katerina fight scene. I just thought that that was really cool
Yeah.
narrative. So this other shot highlighted by this riser.
Rick?
And here, what I added was an Albion Tundra soft string. It actually, listening back now, it kind of sounds like when you're sitting alone at nighttime and what are they called? Cicadas. You kind of sort of hear cicadas chirping. Or it kind of reminds me of when, you know, someone tells a joke and no one laughs, and there's that like quiet
The
period of quiet.
crickets, like Foley.
Exactly. But I thought it was really pretty because it kind of sounded like what was going on outside, but happening inside. So these Albion Tundra high strings and an Albion 1 tremolo synth. I would have to open up the contact. Also, I can write all these things down for you guys,
Cool.
for anyone tuning back in tomorrow, everything that I used. But introducing the soft string after we hear that shot to, again, continue that tension of like, whoa, what's about to happen? What's going on outside? Who are we about to be introduced to? And also replaying or reintroducing that vocal bend that I just really, really loved from when we see Jessica turning her body.
Can you play those solo?
The vocal bends?
Yeah.
Yeah, sure. It sort of lends itself to, I don't trust you. Who are you?
Yeah.
It's cool to reintroduce themes throughout a cue because they remind you of what happened earlier. Just kind of reminding you of the characters that are in the story and the themes that follow them throughout the film. So that was fun to reintroduce that.
Yeah, that's a really great point and a really great tip, right? I spoke briefly about kind of like mnemonics or sonic ideas in more of the brand and ad space at the beginning, but what you're talking about here, right, is setting up these kind of themes for the characters, right? And just in the spirit of helping to tell the story and helping to connect the dots, right?
Yeah.
It helps us to recognize audibly, remembering that sound. We process sound as the quickest kind of impulse, right?
Yep.
It helps us to sonically kind of connect with and resonate with a character. That's really awesome.
Yes, yeah. And it, you know, it adds to the through line of the film. You want to feel the through line of a character. You want to remember what it feels like to be in the space with that character. So it really is like an audio visual aid when you have these like really special little moments of score that remind you who we're dealing with here and what their story is. Someone did ask if these are all the same. Yes, they are all the same. This one has this one I think is, yeah, it's just a little bit shorter. I have it fading in on the fight scene.
And are those all the your harmonies, or did you kind of stack them all in one? And how do you approach doing that?
Ooh, yeah. Okay. Let me tell you guys a little bit about vocal
Let's
track.
get in the weeds.
Yeah.
Production, the vocal production weeds.
Yeah. So here I am. I believe I'm humming. Let's hear it. Yep. So I'm humming this vocal bend, nothing super complicated. I do, like I said before, I do a lot of vocal compositional work. I use my voice a lot in scores, depending on how beefy, how thick I need the voice to be. My bass line is always 3 audio tracks: a center audio track, a panned left audio track, and a panned right audio track, all doing the same exact thing. For the sake of this session and for the sake of committing, I have these going through a Vox and breath bus, which we'll talk about later.
Cool.
But specifically for this one, I have Valhalla Vintage Reverb on all 3 of them. They're doing the same exact thing, but to create that sort of fuller feeling and to create that sort of stereo feeling, you want it to feel like it's everywhere.
Yeah.
So I always try to have one centered vocal, a left vocal, and a right vocal as just my bass line for any sort of vocal that I do. Yes, I recorded 3 different takes of the same vocal.
Yep.
Yeah.
Cool.
That's kind of baseline with tracking these.
Love it.
And then later on, I'll show you guys what I did with these vocals and breaths over here. So do you guys want to get into the fight?
Yeah, let's do it. Let's definitely take a look at those transitions you had, because those, I noticed a lot of people talking about that, and I think that is one of the more difficult areas for me anyway, is kind of creating those really smooth and seamless transitions where you are distinctly in 2 very, very, very different scenes, but they are totally cohesive and totally connected.
Yeah, and I got kind of lucky here with, the visual aid is, that we see Jessica in her painful moment of being alone in this cabin. She has no idea where her sister is. We feel, just with the dialogue and sound effects, we feel her, because we're zooming in on her, it kind of adds, it actually helps me create a riser, which is fantastic. The zoom in and the sort of creation of that riser kind of work hand in hand to cut directly into the Katerina fight scene. So it's visual aid here for me to be able to do that. But, if you're cutting between a really quiet scene that doesn't have something that can help you lead into a more busy, a more like wall of sound sonic space, you figure out different ways to work around that. That's I think for a different day. But
Okay.
yes, but here we have that visual aid of having Jessica really suffering here to lead into the busy fight scene. So let's get into that, and then I will kind of go through what I used to
Awesome.
create this score.
Awesome.
Oh. So like I mentioned before, we are getting into the fight scene. We're coming out of this quiet, tonal space and getting into this sort of like hardcore rock and roll, really propulsive second cue. So I actually did use some of the same drone instruments that I used in the intro for continuity's sake,
Mm.
sonic continuity, and then added a bunch of really fun Spitfire Albion samples here that really I thought worked really well. And it was also my first time using them, so that was really, really fun. One of my favorite things that I'm using here is this brass smack from Albion 1, which is literally just this like beat propulsive brass that I'm really excited to hear how you guys mix this in. Obviously, we want the mix here to be really all encompassing, give that sort of wall of sound where we're still hearing the punching and the hitting and the screaming, but we really feel immersed in this fight along with the characters, you know.
Yeah.
The director really, really loved martial arts, and the actress that he got here to play Katerina is a martial artist and professional fighter herself. And so I really wanted this time around to give her a really, really strong, dark, deep attitude type score with a lot of propulsion and sort of like this sort of 4 on the floor type thing, kind of akin to like Charlie's Angels.
Yeah.
So I really did do that. So we have that same tether drone from the intro, kind of doing that same sustained tension here. Tape bass doing the same.
Got it.
That lowest tone.
And do you find that is a good technique to help provide that continuity, like you were saying, and it just makes it feel more cohesive?
Yeah. Oftentimes when I'm doing a score, I have a folder, and I work primarily in Pro Tools, and so I don't know how it works in Logic or how people organize their sessions in Logic or Ableton. But for me, I always like to bounce out or export sounds that I use early on in a film or a TV show so that I have them handy so that I can reintroduce them later on in further episodes or in later parts of the film, again, to provide that cohesion and to provide that sort of through line, to make sure that everything feels sort of well-rounded.
Yeah.
And I think that's important because you don't want your score to feel like it's 5 or 6 different scores. You want to feel like you're telling one story, not telling a bunch of different sonic stories.
Totally.
So I do redo that. And yeah, so I reuse some of the same drones here, and then a lot of the other stuff is really different.
All right. Yeah, walk us through it. I think everyone's been really excited to hear each track soloed out, and just kind of
you
hear
got it. Yeah. So some of this stuff is to the grid. Some of this stuff is not to the grid because I don't always think it's important for everything to be to the grid, for lack of a better word. I think sometimes it's nice for things to sort of feel off the beaten path or feel like maybe they don't belong there, especially when it's, a really busy scene where you really do want to create that wall of sound. So you'll notice that there's a piano here that is not really adhering to any type of grid. I didn't quantize it, or it's right here actually. I didn't quantize it. I just kind of let it exist as a colorful piece of this puzzle. So let's start at the top.
Cool.
We have a bunch of really tasty Albion stuff going on here. We have those aluminum plucks that are introduced later on once Katerina sort of defeats Rick, or we sort of can see that she's gotten the best of him and like has really beat this guy in the fight. We have those aluminum plucks from the intro that I sort of they lent themselves to the sort of virginal quality of what she was wearing. I have those repeating themselves here in the riser, and then also repeating themselves here during the fight. I also have some high strings that are providing that high end tension. The higher tension, I always find that like high strings mixed with really, really low bass give a lot of color to any sort of scene involving distress. Just putting that out there.
Nice.
And then we have another tremolo synth. There's a really amazing plugin called Tremolator. I believe it's by Sound Toys, but I use it all the time.
Yes.
Is that right? It's by Sound Toys? I don't need to open it up. It's a fantastic plugin. You can create tremolo on literally anything, whether you want 8th notes, 16th notes. I use it a lot here to sort of keep in time with sort of the percussion stuff that I have living here in yellow. The other thing I wanted to show you guys is the brass smack, which is really, really fun.
Cool.
This is from Albion 1. Thought that was really cool and added to that like rock and roll quality. I really wanted Katrina to feel like a fighter goddess.
Yeah.
So I think that brass smack really lent itself to that rock and roll quality, and I didn't add anything to it. That is the raw brass smack sound from Albion 1.
Sweet. So quick question for you, as like, so for that, how do you get a feel for the tempo when you have things that are kind of tempo synced, right? Do you watch the visuals and kind of get a feel for what the pacing of the action is, the pacing of the cuts? What's a good place to start with trying to get a feel for just an overall tempo?
This is a kind of a cool question because tempo is something that I've learned more about as a person who has worked in sync and in score. If you are pitching, if you have a reference visual, you know, whether it's for a commercial project or for a film or TV project, normally, if you're lucky enough, you kind of have a feeling for what the director or the client wants because there is a reference. There's a musical reference that is placed against the cut. So, you know, I don't know, I've just learned this before, Robin, you probably agree with me. If you're given a reference cut and the director's like, I really like the way that this piece of music is sitting under picture, you want to usually match that tempo. And normally they've gotten together with the editor prior to when you start working on it, and have sort of discussed what kind of music they want there, which is what they provide you with before you start to score. So here, obviously, I sort of used my own interpretation. But normally, if you have a director that's offering you a video with a reference, you want to sort of match that tempo. They've been living with that reference for as long as they've been in edit. So a lot of times directors have temp love. So you really want to provide them with something that feels like what they want to exist there. Does that sort of make sense?
Absolutely. Yeah, no, 100%. And I think in thinking about creative briefs and again, kind of operating within this kind of controlled environment, right? You understand kind of where your starting point is. And I think that makes a ton of sense. And it's a great point to kind of build off of.
Yeah, I think that's like one of the most important things I learned in ad music and in sync is like, if you have a reference, try to match the BPM of that reference, because more likely than not, your client has been sitting with the reference longer than they've been sitting with the tracks that they're reviewing to see which one fits. So that's just like a tiny little piece of advice. Take it or leave it.
Yeah, that's a good one. Demo love is very real.
Demo love
Clients
is
fall in love with those
so real.
demos.
Yeah, they really do. You know, and I can't tell you how many times I've sort of done my own thing and then had a director come back and say, do you think you could get closer to the temp? Do you think you could get closer to the ref? And so, you know, and there are ways that you can do your own thing and still have it be to the tempo or to the BPM that the director has on their mind. Here, I really wanted it to, I think I started at 142. I'm not sure why this is here. That doesn't need to be there. The entire 2 Qs here are living at 142, I believe. Yeah, let's see. Yeah, we are on the grid. We're on the grid here. I was able to, because this intro here is not to the grid, I was able to have the BPM just reflect in this fight portion, which is pretty cool.
Awesome.
So here I sort of set it to 142 to match their movements. You can sort of see, you know, kind of the way their physicality is here. You see them sort of moving at a similar tempo to how the music is moving, the propulsive nature, this kick. I'll introduce you guys to some of the percussion going on here now. But that's sort of what I did. I kind of like, I think what I did was I was watching the fight scene, and then the first thing I did was actually sequence this pulsar, which is an amazing synth by Soma Synths. You guys should check them out. Their synths are really, really cool. So the pulsar is doing a lot of the propulsion here. And I'll just play the pulsar here. I can just sort of, there's certain moments that are accentuated by the actual kick. So I thought that 142 is a pretty good tempo here. A lot of it is hitting on the actual punch moment. So that was sort of my mentality behind it, is I wanted to score it as tightly as I could. That was my intention behind picking this specific BPM being 142.
Yep.
So some of the things we have here, you know, moving on from the brass smack, which I love. We have a fun little percussion bell loop here, which I love, from Albion Tundra. Which really, really adds some of that high-end color in contrast with a lot of the low-end stuff going on here. You know, like I showed you guys, we have this like really funky analog pulsar kick. And then here we have these amazing growls from Omnisphere. So that's what's going on in this first section. And this fight scene, I've split up into 2 distinct sections. The sections where we're not sure if Katarina's about to win this fight, and the section where we believe she is. Sort of, it goes from intense fight sequence to sort of like something a bit more sonically heroic. And you'll hear sort of the harmonies here in this second half, juxtaposed to the front half, feel a lot more like we are rooting for Katarina. So I'm just going to play that back.
Yeah, I love making that distinction, and I love the way that you help yourself do it visually as well, just so you again can create within those boundaries and understand what that arc is going to be. I think that's awesome.
Yeah. So, okay, and then I have this one big tom from Albion 1, which is when the switch begins. It's when she kicks him off of her. And I wanted to accentuate that as the distinct moment where we switch into that sort of heroic piece of this score. And it's a simple big wide tom.
How to do it.
As she crosses her hands and kind of like lifts him off of her. And then you'll hear when the kick happens. So just to scrub this really quick, she gets him off of her. And then as soon as we hear the second portion come in is when she kicks him. Because that's the moment we sort of realize, ooh, she's got way more power than we thought. And then an entirely new section comes in here. So I want to play this new section for you guys before I get into it. If that's cool.
Yeah.
Oops. Asking to hear the cues without the sound effects. Would that be helpful?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
We could do that.
One more time. Yeah, there's a lot of grunting. Okay, here is that. Okay. Somebody asked what sounds like the Death Star alarm. I'm assuming that we are talking about synth here, which is me just, for lack of a better word, yelling. And I thought that was really cool. I was looking for a synth that was able to make this sound for me. I couldn't find it in the moment, so I used my microphone. And like I said before, anytime that you don't have a sound that you want, sing it, and then destroy it. So that's what I did here in this transition. We are finally getting into the second portion where we notice Katarina starting to win this fight. And I really wanted to do this sort of like distorted, kind of scream-like synth sound. And so I threw a crap load of vintage, Valhalla vintage verb on it, and distorted it and threw some EQ on it, and it turned into this. So I'm doing a ooh bend, and I'm stretching that out. I'm time warping it, and then I'm doing a. And I tuned it, and I thought it sounded really cool against everything else.
Yeah.
So in addition to that, vocally, just to sort of talk about all the stuff that I'm doing with my mouth here, we've got a bunch of percussive breaths, syncopated breaths.
Yeah.
That aren't totally in time, but I don't think that mattered too much. We have one that I'm looping here. I thought that the breath sounded cool. I love using breath.
I agree.
An additional color of percussion. I also think, the breath sounds sort of feminine, and it almost sounds like it's her sort of breathing. Or it can kind of be sort of perceived as this like internal meditative breath that she's taking to get through this moment. So I thought that there were kind of different ways that you can sort of perceive why the breath is being used. For me, it was sort of a sonic thing. I thought it sounded really cool. I I just threw some EQ on it, took off some of the high end, and I thought it sounded really lovely against all of the rest of the propulsive nature of this section of the cue.
Yeah. And adding to that movement and the momentum that you're creating. And again, back to that idea of the human connection with the human voice, what that connects with. And I also just want to point out here the creative decisions that Julia's making within this process, right? So again, using a brief or using the direction, the visuals, understanding that we're part of this bigger creative project, but still having this creative freedom as we're hearing the thought process from Julia to think about what's an interesting way that I can create this kind of feeling, create this kind of movement that's beyond just kind of the straight and narrow path of I could put in a hi-hat or I can do something along those lines, right? Really allowing yourself to operate creatively within using the North Star of the creative of the project. So you can tie all these really interesting pieces together. And obviously the result is that emotional impact that you really strive for.
Yeah, yeah. Everything plays a part, right? And I guess like part of what you guys are going to talk about for the next 3 days is like where every sound belongs and why it belongs there and what purpose it's serving within the sonic space. And so of course, I'm very, very excited about digging into that. I think for me here, um, the heaviness that it adds, all of these pieces add to this section was really important to me. Again, I wanted it to be busy. I wanted it to be wall of sound. I wanted it to sound big. So everything happening is this section is lending itself to that. The growls, the pulsar, beat drum by sonar, that high-end bell that I showed you guys before, each and every layer is serving a purpose here sonically to provide that sort of full picture, that full sonic feeling. And then I sprinkled some piano here as well. Because I felt that piano kind of hinted back at the fact that like we are fighting for our sister's life. There is still an emotional impact here that we want to demonstrate. And so, you know, with some of the stuff that I'm reintroducing, those church-like aluminum plucks, the piano, they're, you know, those things exist for cohesion, not just for like sonic equality and for everything to sort of have its space. But also, you know, to tell the story of the fact that she's saving her sister from this sort of disaster that she's ended up in, this terrible human trafficking ring. But yeah, we have a lot of beautiful propulsivity, some really, really nice 4 on the floor stuff happening here. And I'm gonna sort of play that independent, those pieces for you guys.
Cool.
All together.
Will you turn down your master
music.
bus just a little bit?
No problem.
Thank you.
We're minus 10 dB. That should be okay.
Cool.
Just text me, Rob, if you want me to kick it down even more.
Will do.
Okay, we got the omniground. We got the bells. We have the toms. Oh, and let's get the breaths in there too. Okay, here's just our percussion. Excuse me. So sorry about that. Let's add our brass max.
Cool.
And isn't it kind of interesting how it doesn't sound like much? It's like
Absolutely.
Add the rest of the sort of the more melodic instruments. Does it feel like almost like the percussion is louder? And I know I did just turn it down a couple of dB, but just even myself as a composer listening back, I'm like, oh crap, it really is not, it's not full enough without the sort of melodic and more drony elements being added to it. But you know, they're doing enough here to give us that consistency, and that sort of the propulsive nature, and trying to keep in time with the moments of fighting and the punches and all of that,
Yeah.
all of those accentuations.
And that's a really good point. Sorry to jump in real quick. For those who've been asking about BPM and how do you set a tempo, I hope that as you're watching back and, coupled with what Julie has been saying about how she starts to dial in the tempo, you start to get a feel for kind of the pacing of the scene and what's going on. And you'll start to get more familiar with what kind of feels right. And like Julia was saying, right, it doesn't have to be on the grid, right? She's chosen 142, and it's not like every single cut or every single action falls on a downbeat of 142 BPM, but you get that feeling that the pacing, the overall pacing of what you're watching feels right to the BPM that Julie has established here. So I just wanted to point that out because I know a lot of questions have been popping up about how do you establish the tempo.
Yes. I mean, guys, there are no rules, honestly. And if someone has told you that there are rules, they're lying, because there aren't any. You can do whatever you want. As long as it's serving, as long as you're doing your job and you have the okay from your director to go rogue, like, all of this is so nuanced. You can do whatever you want. Which is why this is so fun, is like you are able to effectively tell a story through the music, which Rob was sort of touching on before when we first got on, was the intentionality behind music to sort of create the emotional space, and to give us an idea of where we're living, where the characters are living, what is the space we're living in, what is the time we're living in. And so when it comes to like being a stickler about things being on the grid, yeah, unless you're in, you're going into a session in which you've hired an orchestra, and those are the types of things where you sort of want things to remain on the grid, if you're hiring musicians. But all in all, like if you are the sole composer of a project, you can do whatever you want, live your life. So yeah, we've kind of, I think we've gone over every instrumental piece here. I'm wondering if I'm missing anything.
I think we've hit them all. Why don't we kind of listen to the end, see how you've started to, get us out of the scene, right? Using the visuals to kind of show us where we're headed.
Yep. Okay. So believe it or not, the fighting continues. We are we
But wait, there's
are
more.
Once the scene fades out here, Katerina actually begins to run to the cabin where Jessica's being held, where she meets this nameless character here, whose name I truly can't remember. Let's call her Kathy.
Okay.
Where she goes to meet Kathy, and then they continue to fight. Katerina fights her way into the cabin and finds her sister and finds the rest of the women being kept in the cabin. And we have this really beautiful, somber moment where, Katerina has rescued her sister and all of these other women from this horrible, horrible situation. And so there's a lot. It's a massive action sequence. We're only seeing a very small piece of it. In this particular portion, we are seeing her beat out Rick, who is the kingpin here. So the way we kind of come out of this is with some more of like melodic heroicism. I think I added some strings in here, some string harmonies in here that you'll hear, kind of add to that feeling of like, I guess you can think of it as more like classical orchestral film style. Let me play that back for you. Yeah, if you guys
Really pretty.
heard some of those, I believe the strings are right here. So the strings really providing melodically the feeling of I mean, I think that the strings here are playing a really, really big part in adding to the emotional quality, because if you mute them, all you hear is this. So you're hearing the fight scene, but you're hearing what belongs there in terms of drones and in terms of percussion. But
Yeah.
you're not hearing really like what emotionally we're trying to say or instrumentally trying to say. So
Can
I
you
felt
put those strings? Can you put those strings back in just for a quick A/B?
yeah, let's A/B it.
I mean, I think specifically with what you were saying about how you split up the fight scene to kind of the beginning half, what's going to happen, and then the latter half where it's more of that feeling of triumph and victory, right? And I think pointing out that string line to help drive home that feeling of we're rising up, right? We're becoming triumphant. We are reigning supreme and winning. I think that does such an awesome job, and it's really cool to A/B it and see it out. Not that you totally miss that, right? You wouldn't say like, oh, she's losing the fight without the strings, but just again, with the idea that sync is and composition is providing this emotional depth, helping to tell the story, creating that intent. You really get a feel for it when you A/B it like that. So I love seeing that. And I loved how you pointed out the kind of nostalgic, very tender piano line that you had written in there as well. I think that's really beautiful and a really great technique, right? To hear that kind of tucked in, it's for me, and I wonder how you feel. It's something that's more felt almost than heard, and it kind of like creates that connection for you, tucked in there. So I think that was really beautiful and smart.
Yeah, it is. I mean, it is quite interesting. Like if you listen to even the first section of this cue, the section with just Jessica, it almost sounds like there's nothing going on. These like subtleties, these like this one stem that's giving you almost everything here. It's always like the smallest things that give the biggest impact.
Totally.
So that's always fun to think about here. But yeah, guys, like that was sort of my entire thought process behind this. You know, I would call this sort of a hybrid orchestral score in terms of if we want to get genre specific, just because we're using strings here and we're using a lot of synths and drones. So it's really, kind of taking from orchestral world, taking from analog synth world, and bringing it together for something beautiful and harmonious.
Yeah. No, it's really, really well done, Julia. I think that's awesome. And it's interesting that you mentioned kind of like what you would you call it, it's this hybrid kind of piece. One of the things I love about sync is not that it's genre agnostic, right? But genres don't play as heavy a role, right? Because it's about the emotional impact. It's
Yeah.
about the feeling. And like we were talking about earlier, how you get to that feeling isn't a set path. It isn't carved in stone. It's not one sound, one direction, one genre that brings you there. And I think, as we've learned from Julia, depending on the information from the filmmaker, the genre of the movie, all of these different pieces play a role in helping to make these music and compositional decisions. And it's really interesting to see that all come together.
Yeah. Thank
That's
you.
awesome.
I thought it was really great. I learned a lot watching your process. It was a real treat to be able to watch that. One's in chat for Julia. Incredible work.
Oh, thanks, guys.
Look at them.
I'm sending you guys all ones too.
They've been very complimentary. It was very cool to see that and to have it. It's not often you get to see behind the scenes and get this kind of in-depth look at someone's process. So it's very cool.
Yeah.
And I really appreciate you taking the time to do this. We can head off doing some questions, Rob, right? And
Yeah.
then we'll send you away with some sort of assignment or a link they can follow
Yes,
along, right?
indeed. So, yeah, let me talk a little bit about that, and then we can jump into some questions. And I saw some questions pop up that I'm gonna kind of direct over to you, Julia, just about process and
Yeah.
things like that. So, for tomorrow, everybody, I'm gonna pull up a screen here at the end of our session. You will have an opportunity to submit some work for the opportunity to go against this picture tomorrow. So day 2, as we talked about in the beginning, we're taking a little bit of a shift and we're going to look at putting music against this same visual, but from an existing catalog. So we're going to see what differs from the emotional impact that we're able to make, right? When we have a little bit or a lot less creative freedom of how we're specifically composing, it's even more important that we understand the emotion, we understand the creative intention. So, how do we focus solely on that intention, solely on the emotional impact, and see what works and what doesn't work based on existing tracks that we have? So, we're going to take a bunch of tracks. I'm going to show you how we navigate music libraries, how we talk about these emotions and these themes, how they're categorized, how we pick them, put them against picture, what's working, what's not working, and we'll take it from there. But you'll have a chance to submit one track if you'd like for the dramatic tension cue, right, the top half of the visuals, and one cue, one track for the action fight scene. Understanding that it's not going to be dialed into picture like Julia's. It's not going to match up perfectly. It's not going to be 142 BPM necessarily. Maybe you have a lot in your catalog, who knows? But just seeing from existing pieces of music, how close can we get? What types of emotional impacts do we have? And even thinking about what Julia was talking about at the beginning, how when she first scored this, it was a little bit more subdued, right? There's no right or wrong way to do this. So it'll be a lot of fun to take different pieces and see the different emotional impact that we have, right? We're still trying to get that same creative and emotional intention, but how do we get there in a different way? So that's what tomorrow is going to be. I'm going to show you, I'll put up a link, a QR code, and I'll paste the link in the chat as well, where you can submit your tracks for consideration to go up against picture. We will pick a couple just to go through tomorrow and see. We ask one track per cue, please, or one track per scene. So one dramatic, one for the action fight scene.
That's super fun. And
Yeah.
regardless of whether yours gets picked to be with picture, it's really an important part of the process is taking what you picked up today and learning through the process of doing kinesthetically. That'll make the pieces come together. If I was doing it, I'd probably end up appreciating what Julia did even more because I'd realize how hard it is. But that's all part of the learning process.
For sure. Yeah, no, that's a really good point, right? Look through your catalog through this lens of creative intention and emotional impact and see what you can find. So Julia, really quickly, a question I had seen pop up a bunch.
Yes.
In sync, we talk a lot about how important it is to work efficiently and to work quickly. Deadlines are usually very tight, and there's a lot of pressure to get things done. What's your process for storing and accessing your favorite sounds? Do you kind of have like a go-to catalog of uh, instruments and sounds and effects that you go to?
Yeah, well, these days I've been actually using a lot less um, creative sample packs than I used to. And that's only because I have a lot of fun uh, tracking my own instruments. I have started to track my own violin and viola. I'm a viola player and a pianist and a guitarist. And so it's been really fun to get better at sort of, tracking my own instruments. What I do like to do, as I sort of mentioned before, especially if you're working on a project, um, when you're composing a project on your own, is to keep track of what sounds you discover along the way. Like let's say you're working on an episodic, and in episode 1, you have this protagonist, and we are introduced to this protagonist in a vulnerable moment, let's say, and you've written a piece of score that thematically really works well against this character. You want to take those sounds from that session and you want to store them and hold on to them, because that character is going to reappear, or that vulnerable feeling or moment is going to reappear. There's a reason it was introduced in the first episode in the first place. So, just as an organizational tool, you want to have a folder of sounds that you've bounced out and that you've kept for later on. That's always been a really, really important part of my scoring process, is to hold on to sounds so that they're more accessible for later. I mean, I can't tell you how important it is to keep yourself organized, especially when you're working in TV and film, because you know, especially if you're in the post-production process, you are going back and forth with the director and an editor, and you're receiving new cuts of the edit constantly. So all of that takes up space on your computer. All of these sounds, all of these sample packs take up space on your computer, especially with, I love the Spitfire stuff. I really do. I do use the solo strings from Spitfire a lot because I'm not a great cello player. I try to keep my contact, and I use contact a lot, pretty organized based on like just having the instruments there that I love to use. So, keeping your CPU as low as possible, keeping your samples organized, keeping your found sounds organized. And by found sounds, I mean the sounds that you create yourself and want to hold on to and use and reuse. I'm not sure if I answered the question, but
Yeah.
I guess I'm more saying like there's a lot to be said about keeping yourself organized and not flooding your sessions and flooding your computer with material that you're not really interested in using at that point in your creative process.
Yeah. No, it totally makes sense. I remember someone kind of talking about it in terms of, I think they were watching like a lot of HGTV, and like cleaning out like if it's a sound you haven't used, like if you come across a sound and you're like, what's sound? I don't even know what this is. Like, how long have I had this? And you listen to
Yeah.
it and you're not inspired by it. Like, might be
Yeah.
okay to retire that sound.
Yeah, it's gonna be okay. It's gonna
Yeah.
be okay if you let it go. I think as like musicians, I know like I'm kind of a musical instrument hoarder, and like, the same with like the things that I have, the samples that I have on my computer, um, you don't need to hold on to everything, as you grow as a writer, like new sounds come up, and make room for them.
I might need to like hang that on my wall. Be like, it's okay to delete that sample pack that you never use, and I know you
Yeah,
got it for free, and one day
or like
you'll
those
use it.
waves
But
cracks from
the waves
2005.
cracks.
Time to let go.
Totally.
Yeah.
That's really funny. How much in the box versus live instrumentation are you usually on average for a project?
Um, what am I allowed to say? Is there a Spitfire rep here?
You could say whatever,
Uh,
we could say whatever you want.
What I'm gonna say is I mostly do out of the box. I've gotten really lucky in that I've been able to afford and purchase some amazing instruments that are behind me. Violin, we have a viola on this wall. I have a guitar lele from D'Angelico on this wall. I have a horde of guitars. I have a cello, and I wasn't always a really strong string player, but once I started realizing like, oh, that, I still have playing viola in my mind. Like, even though I haven't practiced in years, it's still there. I still can do a vibrato. And so once you start doing it every day, I mean, this is my job. So I'm in the studio pretty much every day playing these instruments. You just end up, that becomes your practice time. And so, um, and I love like I love finding new instruments. I was recently in Mexico City and bought this like amazing ocarina, which I know looks like ovaries, but it's just, I just love collecting new sounds. I think that's the most fun you can have as a
That's cool.
is to be out in the world and collect things, collect instruments, collect sounds you hear. I was in a Joshua Tree, like I think it was like 2 years ago or something, and I was laying under this tree, and the way that the wind was filtering through the branches of this tree created this whistle, and I heard that sound and I was like, crap, I got to record that and I got to use it in something. Like, I think as a music maker, it's really important to like always be listening and to always be listening for what you hear out in the world, because all of that does reflect in your writing. I think that if we just sit in our houses all day long and just don't go out into the world and hear what's around us, you don't learn anything new. Your ears kind of stay the same. It's fun to branch out and find new things.
Yeah.
But again, with a lot of the instruments around me, I've learned how to play them and I've learned how to use them in my scores. So that's been really useful for me, especially for scores that are sort of under budget, or I don't have there's not enough money in the budget to track an orchestra. I've gotten lucky in that I can record a lot of string stacks on my own, which has
That's
been,
awesome. And
yeah.
I would imagine it's helpful, the tools that we have available to us now are so amazing. Spitfire, obviously, right? We talk about this a lot in
Mhm.
our course. The quality of the instruments that you're using and the articulations, just the importance of understanding that and having high quality instruments that allow you to be expressive, right? That allow you to emulate these amazing, beautiful instruments that you have access to, that majority of people, frankly, don't have access to, right? I think that as tools like this Spitfire solo strings that you said,
Oh,
that you mentioned using a bunch, or like the strings in Albion, give us access to these really expressive instruments, and being able to play the instruments obviously and listen to live instruments and understand those articulations and what emotions they evoke.
yeah.
Being able to replicate that in the box is something that I think is pretty exciting, and gives people access to that type of connection that you can make through the music.
Yeah, and these Spitfire is incredible, first of all, because they are so user friendly, and I think that the material that they create, it's for composers, it's for music writers. Everything that they put out is intentionally for the writer. And so I just, I really, really have always appreciated the sounds behind Spitfire. Their stuff is really incredible and sounds so amazing. And if you don't play strings, like Spitfire solo strings, Spitfire chamber strings, all of the Albion stuff is phenomenal. It's beautiful, beautiful, beautiful stuff. And I highly encourage everyone to dig in when they can. Yeah, Spitfire is kick ass. I
Yeah.
love it, guys.
I I've had that experience, right? Where it's like I can't play strings really. And then I'll just open up one of those instruments and be like, oh, I
Yeah.
can add some strings to this.
Yeah, yeah, it's really, really great, especially for like some of the bigger trailer stuff. Like if you're
Yeah, sure.
large orchestral arrangements that you can use an entire Spitfire set for you can create an entire score out of this stuff. I mean, it's incredible.
Absolutely. And just, yeah, I mean, versatility in general, right? With different sounds. And like Julia's saying, the biggest takeaway for me is the curiosity and the excitement and the open-mindedness to hear new things and play with new things and try some things out. Strings is a specific example. It doesn't just mean you have to score an orchestral or a hybrid kind of movie piece, right?
Mhm.
Working it into an R&B song, a soul song, a pop song. There are so many different applications. A mnemonic for a brand. All of these different touch points. It's not limited to one thing, and it kind of, I guess, goes back to what I was saying a little bit earlier about it's genre agnostic to a certain degree, right? What emotion does that cello? I happen to love the sound of a cello, right? And the deep emotional connection that it evokes for me. And that's applicable across a lot of things, right? Just music that I'm producing to release or to be a part of a film, to be a part of a commercial. I think that versatility lives within there when you really start to understand the emotion of the emotional output of your instruments.
Yeah. Oh gosh. Sometimes I don't have a cello, but I have a viola. And so I'll play, a melody that I really want, and then I'll drop it down, uh, you know, like -12, and then it'll be a cello. Do stuff like
Yeah,
that. There's so much room for play here. I think that's what I'm kind of trying to emphasize. This is supposed to be fun.
totally. Totally. Any other questions for today, guys? You know what? While we're talking, why don't Julia, why don't you stop your screen share? I will pull up this QR code for you all. And I will also, there you have it. So take a picture of that with your phones. I will also paste the link in the chat. Give me just a moment here. So oops, pop that in there. Take a picture of that. Here comes the link. If I can get this to just collapse, convert to plain link. Talk you guys through every single thing I'm doing. And let me paste this in here for you guys. Again, asking everyone just submit one track per queue. And you should be able to do that pretty easily. The naming convention is here, right? Just so you guys see. So please name your track your full name, first and last name, _syncfest_drama for the dramatic tension submissions. And then your full name, first and last, _syncfest_action for the intense action submissions. They can be any length of time. They can be any genre. They can be any feel. 24 or 48 bit.
2440.
So sorry, 2448. Yeah, 2448 is fine.
When's the time? When's the time limit, or what's the?
Yeah, sorry. So we're going to cut off the submissions at at 11:59 p.m. Eastern time tonight.
Cool.
Wave files preferred. Yes.
MP3 is fine though, if that's what you have. Don't
Yep,
stress,
absolutely.
especially if it's
It does not have to be 2 tracks. If you have 1 track, if you have no tracks, no problem. If you just want to submit for the dramatic tension scene, just submit for that. Vice versa, just submit for the action scene, no problem. It should be original pieces. So something that you have composed yourself. No video, just the audio. It can have lyrics. We can let's see what all the things do, right? That way, the goal of tomorrow is really to look at a wide variety of options and notice what changes, right? The more we can become aware of the different elements that impact the ultimate creative vision, the better we'll be at dialing those in and really understanding how we deliver those for our clients. So that's the goal of the exercise.
awesome. I'm excited to see what everyone submits. I thought it was a lot of fun. Did you guys have fun today? Was that insightful? Was that interesting? I thought it was. Rob, thank you so much. Your wisdom is incredible. We're lucky to have you on the team. Julia, very nice to meet you today.
Yeah, thank you guys so
Really
much.
great stuff. I felt a total kinship to you in the way that you produce stuff. It's very similar to the way my business partner and I do stuff. The breaths, all that kind of stuff is just stuff we love too. So I just felt really connected to you. And I thought it was really fun watching your process and learning from you. So thank you so much for taking some time to be with us. And thank you all for being here. For those of you who lasted the whole time, you're the awesome ones. You made it all the way through. You're the gluttons for punishment. Ones that'll be back tomorrow. I know how this works. All right. It's been fun. Thank you all for coming. Hope you all have a great evening. Same time, same place tomorrow. And we'll dive into this. We'll learn a lot about the library choosing. We'll get into some information about how to, navigate the industry, that kind of stuff. And then day 3, we'll mix and master, and it should be a ton of fun. So we'll see you all tomorrow. Have a good one. Thanks again, Julia. Thanks, Rob.